The Boeing 737 shuddered through turbulence at 37,000 feet, its passengers gripping armrests as coffee spilled and overhead bins rattled. In seat 14C, Major Iris Nighthawk Valdez turned another page of her paperback novel, completely unbothered by the chaos around her. She'd felt real turbulence before, the kind that came with surface-to-air missiles screaming past your canopy at Mach 2. This was nothing. The businessman beside her was green around the gills, clutching a sick bag. Behind her, a child wailed as his mother whispered reassurances. But Iris remained focused on her book, her weathered hands steady despite the aircraft's violent lurching. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived things most people couldn't imagine. Her short black hair was streaked with premature silver, and a thin scar ran from her left temple to her jawline, a souvenir from her final mission over Syria. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison speaking." The intercom crackled with tension. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties with our navigation systems, and I need to ask an unusual question. Is there anyone aboard with military aviation experience? Anyone at all?" The cabin fell silent except for the engine's labored whine. Passengers exchanged nervous glances. The mother clutched her child tighter. The businessman's knuckles went white. Iris closed her book slowly, marking her place with a boarding pass stub. She could feel eyes turning toward her, though none of these civilians would know what those worn hands and steady eyes meant. They saw a middle-aged woman in jeans and a faded Air Force t-shirt. They didn't see the 800 combat hours, the distinguished flying cross hidden in her carry-on, or the call sign that had once struck fear into enemy pilots across 3 theaters of war. "I need to speak with you immediately." Captain Morrison's voice carried a note of desperation now. "We've lost primary navigation, backup systems are failing, and there's something else, something I can only discuss with qualified personnel." The flight attendant moved down the aisle, scanning faces with growing anxiety. Iris could see the woman's training warring with panic. She was looking for someone in uniform, someone obvious. Her gaze passed right over the quiet woman in 14C. Outside the small window, Iris noticed something that made her blood run cold. Far below, barely visible through the cloud cover, were the geometric patterns of military installations. They weren't on any civilian flight path she knew, and in the distance, like silver needles against the darkening sky, she spotted the unmistakable silhouettes of fighter jets rising to meet them. The flight attendant was still searching, still waiting for someone to raise their hand. But Iris Valdez was already calculating intercept vectors and threat assessments, her mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept her alive through 47 combat missions. She reached up and pressed the call button. Time to go to work. The flight attendant hurried over, hope flickering in her eyes when she saw Iris's calm demeanor. "Ma'am, did you hear the captain's announcement?" "I heard." Iris unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, her movements economical and precise. Around them, passengers whispered anxiously, their conversations a low hum of fear. "Tell Captain Morrison that Major Iris Valdez, United States Air Force, is coming forward, retired but current on emergency procedures." The flight attendant's relief was palpable. "Oh, thank God, please follow me." As they made their way toward the cockpit, Iris caught fragments of panicked conversations. A teenage girl was texting frantically. An elderly man clutched his wife's hand, whispering prayers. A young soldier in dress blues, probably heading home on leave, watched Iris with recognition dawning in his eyes. He'd seen that walk before, that particular way combat veterans carried themselves. The cockpit door opened to reveal Captain Morrison, a graying man with sweat beading on his forehead, despite the aircraft's air conditioning. His co-pilot, younger and clearly rattled, was cycling through instrument panels with increasing desperation. "Major Valdez." Morrison's voice carried a mixture of relief and skepticism. He'd obviously been hopping for someone younger, someone male, someone who looked more like his idea of a military pilot. "That's correct, Captain." Iris stepped into the cramped space, her trained eyes immediately scanning the instrument panels. "What's your situation?" "We've lost GPS, backup navigation is intermittent, and our transponder is malfunctioning. But that's not the worst part." Morrison gestured toward the radio. "We're being contacted by military aircraft. They're ordering us to deviate from our flight path immediately." Iris moved to the side window and peered down. The fighter jets were closer now, their sleek forms cutting through the afternoon sky with predatory grace. Even at this distance, she could identify them. F-22 Raptors, the most advanced air superiority fighters in the world. They weren't there for show. "Have you responded to their hails?" she asked, settling into the jump seat behind the pilots. "We tried," the co-pilot said, his voice tight. "But they're using military frequencies. We don't have the right equipment." Iris studied the fighters' formation. They were maintaining a loose escort pattern, professional but menacing. "Captain, I need you to contact air traffic control immediately. Tell them you have a military consultant aboard and request emergency clearance to whatever heading those Raptors want us to fly." "You think they're serious?" Morrison asked. Outside, one of the F-22s rolled inverted and passed directly beneath the airliner, close enough that Iris could see the pilot's helmet in the canopy. The message was unmistakable: comply or face the consequences. She delivered similar warnings herself, years ago, to aircraft that had strayed into restricted airspace over combat zones. "Captain," she said quietly, "those pilots have authority to shoot us down if they perceive us as a threat. I suggest we follow their lead." The radio crackled with the terse professionalism that Iris knew well. "United 847, this is Raptor lead. You will maintain current heading and altitude until further notice. Acknowledge." Captain Morrison fumbled with the microphone. "Raptor lead, United 847. We acknowledge, but we need to understand what's happening here. We have 163 souls aboard this aircraft." Silence stretched across the airwaves. Iris could see the tension in Morrison's shoulders, the way his co-pilot's hands trembled slightly on the controls. These were good pilots, experienced commercial aviators, but they'd never faced anything like this. "United 847, be advised you have entered restricted military airspace. You will be escorted to Edwards Air Force Base for immediate landing. Any deviation from flight path will be considered hostile. How copy?" Iris leaned forward. "Captain, let me talk to them." Morrison hesitated, then handed her the microphone. She keyed the transmit button with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent thousands of hours on military frequencies. "Raptor lead, this is Major Iris Valdez, United States Air Force, aboard United 847. I'm current on military procedures and can assist with compliance. Request clarification on the nature of our airspace violation." The response came faster this time, and Iris detected a note of surprise in the pilot's voice. "Major Valdez, authenticate with your service number and last duty station." "Service number 447899021, last duty station Incirlik Air Base, Turkey, 363rd Fighter Squadron." She paused, knowing what would come next. "Call sign Nighthawk." The silence that followed was longer than before. Iris could imagine the conversation happening on the military frequency between the fighter pilots. Her reputation had preceded her even into retirement. "Nighthawk, Raptor lead. Understood. Be advised your aircraft appears on our systems as potentially hijacked. We need visual confirmation that you are not under duress." Morrison's eyes widened. "Hijacked? That's impossible. We've been monitoring our passengers since takeoff." Iris studied the instrument panel again, noticing details she'd missed before. The transponder wasn't just malfunctioning. It was broadcasting the wrong code entirely. Someone had tampered with their aircraft's identification systems, making them appear as a threat to anyone monitoring air traffic. Raptor lead Nighthawk, I have eyes on your formation. Beautiful aircraft. I need to verify, are we showing hijack codes on your systems? Affirmative, Nighthawk. Your transponder is broadcasting 7500. We have orders to escort you to Edwards for security screening. The hijack code. Iris felt ice in her veins. Someone had deliberately sabotaged their aircraft to make it appear that terrorists had taken control. But why? And more importantly, who had the technical knowledge to pull off such a sophisticated attack on civilian aviation systems? She looked at Captain Morrison, seeing her own grim realization reflected in his eyes. They weren't just dealing with mechanical failure. They were pawns in someone's much larger, much deadlier game. The cabin behind them erupted in confusion as news of the military escort spread among the passengers. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, trying to maintain calm while their own voices betrayed uncertainty. Iris could hear a man shouting into his phone before being told to end the call. A woman was crying softly, probably wondering if she'd ever see her family again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Morrison's voice over the intercom carried forced calm. Due to a technical issue with our navigation systems, we're being escorted by military aircraft to Edwards Air Force Base as a precautionary measure. Please remain in your seats and follow all crew instructions. The co-pilot, whose name tag read Martinez, was cycling through emergency checklists with methodical precision. Major, what do you think we're really dealing with here? Iris studied the instrument cluster, noting which systems were functioning normally and which were not. The pattern was too precise to be random failure. Someone with intimate knowledge of Boeing 737 systems hacked our transponder and possibly other navigation equipment. The question is whether they're aboard this aircraft or controlling us remotely. Morrison paled. You think there's a terrorist on the plane? I think there's someone who wants it to appear that way. Iris keyed the radio again. Raptor lead Nighthawk, what's your visual assessment of our flight characteristics? Any indication of hostile control? Nighthawk, your aircraft appears to be flying normally. No erratic maneuvers or deviation from assigned headings, but we have intelligence suggesting this flight was targeted for hijacking. Intelligence. That meant this wasn't a spontaneous security response. Someone had warned the military that United 847 was a threat. But who? And how did they know about the transponder manipulation before it happened? Through the cockpit window, Iris watched one of the F-22s slide into closer formation. The pilot was young, probably early 30s, his helmet reflecting the afternoon sun. She'd been that young once, flying combat air patrol missions over hostile territory, never imagining she'd one day be on the other side of such an intercept. Her phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but the content made her blood freeze. Major Valdez, you have 15 minutes to convince those fighters that your aircraft is not a threat or they will shoot you down. The choice is yours. Act wisely. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Someone knew exactly who she was, knew she was aboard this flight, and was using her presence as part of their plan. But what plan? What could possibly be worth threatening a commercial airliner full of innocent people? Captain, she said quietly, I need you to have the flight attendants conduct a discreet security sweep of the passengers. Look for anyone acting suspicious, anyone with electronic devices they shouldn't have, anyone who seems too calm given our situation. Morrison nodded grimly and reached for the intercom. Outside, the desert landscape of Nevada stretched endlessly below them, the geometry of Edwards Air Force Base visible in the distance. They were running out of time, and Iris was beginning to suspect that landing safely was exactly what someone didn't want them to do. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, their trained eyes scanning for anything unusual. In first class, A businessman typed furiously on a laptop despite being told to power down electronics. In coach, an elderly woman clutched a large purse with unusual protectiveness. Near the back, a young man in a hoodie kept checking his phone, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Raptor lead, Nighthawk. Iris kept her voice steady despite the growing tension. Request permission to speak directly with your commanding officer. I have reason to believe this situation is more complex than it appears. Stand by, Nighthawk. The radio fell silent for several minutes. Through her earpiece, Iris could hear cross-chatter between the fighter pilots, their communications encrypted and unintelligible to civilian equipment. She'd been on the other side of similar conversations countless times, pilots sharing tactical assessments, threat evaluations, and rules of engagement updates. Martinez was studying the fuel gauges with increasing concern. Major, at our current consumption rate and with this detour to Edwards, we're going to be cutting it close on fuel reserves. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Whoever had orchestrated this wanted them at Edwards specifically, wanted them running low on fuel with limited options. But Edwards was one of the most secure military installations in the country. What possible advantage could putting a civilian aircraft there serve? Her phone buzzed again. 12 minutes remaining. The longer you delay, the more suspicious you appear. Remember, Major, you have 163 souls depending on your reputation. Iris showed the message to Morrison, whose face went ashen. They're counting on you to convince the fighters we're not a threat. It appears so. She studied the message again, noting the precise passenger count. Whoever was behind this had detailed information about their flight manifest. But they've made a tactical error. They're assuming I still think like an active duty officer. What do you mean? Before Iris could answer, the radio crackled back to life. Nighthawk, this is Colonel Sarah Chen, Edwards Command. I've reviewed your service record. Impressive. What's your assessment of the situation? Iris closed her eyes briefly, recognizing the voice. Sarah Chen had been a captain when they'd served together in Afghanistan, flying F-16s on close air support missions. Now, she was apparently running air defense for one of the most classified installations in the Air Force. Colonel Chen, Nighthawk, good to hear your voice again. I believe someone is using our aircraft as a pawn in a larger operation. The transponder manipulation was deliberate, the intelligence warning was planted, and they're trying to force us to land at Edwards. Why Edwards specifically? That was the million-dollar question. Edwards housed some of the most advanced aircraft in the world, cutting-edge technology that foreign governments would kill to obtain. It was also home to test flights of classified systems that officially didn't exist. Iris looked out at the F-22s maintaining formation around them, their pilots ready to fire at a moment's notice. Sarah, what high-value assets are currently at Edwards? What's there that someone might want access to? The pause that followed told her everything she needed to know. Whatever was at Edwards, it was classified far above her security clearance level. Nighthawk, I can't discuss operational details over this frequency. Colonel Chen's voice carried the weight of classified secrets. But I need you to understand, if your aircraft poses any threat to this installation, my pilots have orders to neutralize that threat. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah Chen, her former wingwoman, the pilot who had saved her life over Kandahar when her F-16 took shrapnel from an improvised surface-to-air missile, was prepared to order her death. The military machine ground forward with ruthless efficiency, personal relationships irrelevant when national security was at stake. Understood, Colonel. Iris kept her voice professional despite the emotion threatening to break through. But Sarah, think tactically. Why would real terrorists broadcast hijack codes? Why make themselves obvious to your air defense systems? Because amateurs make mistakes. Do amateurs have the technical capability to hack Boeing navigation systems remotely? Do they have access to intelligence channels that let them plant warnings about specific flights before those flights are actually hijacked? Another pause. Iris could imagine Chen weighing the implications, her tactical mind processing scenarios and threat assessments. They'd flown enough missions together for Iris to know how her former colleague thought: methodical, thorough, always considering multiple possibilities. The businessman in first class suddenly closed his laptop and began moving toward the front of the aircraft, pushing past a flight attendant who tried to redirect him back to his seat. Iris caught Morrison's attention and pointed toward the disturbance. "Sir, you need to return to your seat immediately," the flight attendant said firmly. "I demand to speak with the pilot," the man replied, his accent betraying Eastern European origins. "I have information about what's happening to this aircraft." Iris studied him through the cockpit doorway, mid-40s, expensive suit, manicured hands that showed no signs of manual labor. But his eyes were alert, calculating, and completely unafraid despite their circumstances. Either he was remarkably calm under pressure, or he knew something the rest of them didn't. Her phone buzzed. 8 minutes. Your friend Colonel Chen won't hesitate to pull the trigger. She's already lost too many people to threats that seemed harmless at first. The message carried intimate knowledge of Chen's military service, her personal losses in combat. Iris felt a chill of recognition. Whoever was orchestrating this knew both their service records in detail. They'd specifically chosen this flight because she would be aboard, because her reputation might buy them precious minutes. "Martinez, can you patch me into the cabin intercom?" she asked. The co-pilot nodded and handed her the microphone. Iris keyed the transmit button, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death decisions. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Major Valdez. I need everyone to remain absolutely calm and seated. We're dealing with a complex situation, but I want you to know that I will get this aircraft on the ground safely. However, I need your complete cooperation." The cabin fell silent, 163 people hanging on every word from someone they'd never seen before but who somehow commanded instant respect. The businessman in the expensive suit stopped pushing toward the cockpit, but his eyes remained fixed on Iris through the doorway. Something about his expression, too knowing, too prepared, set off every instinct she developed during her years in combat zones. "Sir, I need you back in your seat now," Iris called to him directly. "Major Valdez, I believe you need to hear what I have to say." His English was precise, accented but fluent. "My name is Viktor Kozlov. I work for the State Department and I know why your aircraft was sabotaged." The State Department. Iris exchanged glances with Morrison, both of them recognizing the implications. If this man was telling the truth, then the situation was far more complex than a simple terrorist threat or mechanical failure. "Colonel Chen, Nighthawk," Iris transmitted. "I have a passenger claiming State Department credentials with information about our situation, requesting guidance." "Negative, Nighthawk. Edwards Command cannot verify passenger identities or credentials. You are 6 minutes from mandatory intercept. Any deviation from current heading will trigger defensive measures." 6 minutes. Iris felt the weight of 163 lives pressing down on her shoulders. In 6 minutes, Sarah Chen would order the F-22s to fire, and this conversation would end in a fireball of twisted metal and burning fuel scattered across the Nevada desert. Kozlov stepped closer to the cockpit doorway, his hands visible and empty in a gesture of non-aggression. "Major, the transponder hack was designed to bring you to Edwards. Someone wants access to what's housed there. Your aircraft isn't the weapon, it's the delivery system." "For what?" "For me." His admission carried the weight of terrible truth. "I'm carrying intelligence that several foreign governments would kill for. They sabotaged this flight to force an emergency landing at Edwards, where they have assets positioned to extract me during the confusion." Morrison's hands tightened on the yoke. "You're saying we're all expendable, that 163 innocent people are just collateral damage in some spy game." Kozlov nodded grimly. "Unless we can convince Colonel Chen to divert us to a different airfield, somewhere without the security vulnerabilities that Edwards currently has." Iris processed the information rapidly. If Kozlov was telling the truth, then landing at Edwards would accomplish exactly what the real architects of this crisis wanted. But if he was lying, if he was actually the threat, then diverting away from the secure military installation could be catastrophic. Her phone buzzed one final time. "4 minutes, Major. Choose wisely. Your friend Colonel Chen has her finger on the trigger." Through the windscreen, Edwards Air Force Base grew larger, its runways and hangars clearly visible now. The F-22s maintained their escort formation, sleek predators ready to strike at the first sign of hostile intent. Iris could see other aircraft scrambling from the base, additional fighters taking position, ground-based missile systems tracking their approach. The sky around them had become a killing field, and she was the only person who might be able to navigate them safely through it. "Colonel Chen, Nighthawk." Iris keyed the radio with steady hands despite the chaos building around her. "I'm requesting emergency diversion to Nellie's Air Force Base. I have intelligence suggesting Edwards is compromised." The response was immediate and sharp. "Negative, Nighthawk. You will maintain approach to Edwards. We have security protocols in place." "Sarah, listen to me. You have assets positioned at Edwards that someone wants access to. This entire scenario, the transponder hack, the hijack codes, the intelligence warning, it's all designed to force us to your location." Through the cockpit window, she could see the lead F-22 pilot adjusting his position, moving into optimal firing angle. His wingman paralleled the maneuver, both aircraft now positioned to deliver a coordinated missile strike that would vaporize the commercial airliner in seconds. Kozlov had moved closer to the cockpit doorway, his face pale but determined. "Colonel Chen, this is Victor Kozlov, State Department Intelligence Officer, identification number 47 Alpha 992 Delta. I am carrying classified information related to foreign penetration of military installations. Edwards has been compromised." The radio fell silent for long moments. Iris could imagine the frantic background conversations at Edwards' command, security officers checking databases, intelligence analysts verifying credentials, commanders weighing impossible decisions with seconds to spare. Martinez was monitoring the fuel gauges with growing alarm. "Major, we're below minimum reserves for any alternate destination. If we don't land in the next 10 minutes, we're going to flame out regardless of what those fighters do." Another trap within the trap. Even if Chen approved a diversion, they no longer had the fuel to reach another suitable airfield. Whoever had orchestrated this crisis had calculated every variable, anticipated every possible response. "Nighthawk, Edwards' command." Chen's voice carried the strain of command decisions made under impossible pressure. "Mr. Kozlov's credentials check out, but we cannot divert you to Nellie's. You don't have the fuel, and they don't have the emergency response capabilities you might need." The F-22s were closing formation now, their pilots undoubtedly receiving updated rules of engagement. Iris could see missile bay doors opening on the lead aircraft, the final warning before weapons release. Her phone had gone silent, but she didn't need another message to understand the countdown continuing in real time. Every second brought them closer to a moment when military necessity would override personal relationships, when Sarah Chen would have to choose between 163 civilian lives and whatever secrets Edwards Air Force Base contained. "Sarah," Iris transmitted on a rarely used emergency frequency, one reserved for pilot-to-pilot communication during combat operations. "You saved my life over Kandahar. Now I'm asking you to trust me one more time. Let us land at Edwards, but have your security forces ready for what's really coming." The silence stretched endlessly as two former wingwomen faced each other across a gulf of classified secrets and impossible choices. The lead F-22 suddenly broke formation, rolling inverted and pulling away from the airliner in a maneuver that spoke louder than any radio transmission. Colonel Chen had made her decision. All aircraft, this is Edwards' command. United 847 is cleared for emergency approach, runway 4 left. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Relief flooded through Iris, but she knew their ordeal was far from over. Landing safely was only the first challenge. Whatever was waiting for them on the ground would determine whether Kozlov's intelligence was accurate or whether they were walking into an even deadlier trap. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison. We are beginning our descent into Edwards Air Force Base. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and prepare for landing." The desert landscape rushed up to meet them, the geometric patterns of the military installation growing clearer by the second. Iris could see vehicles positioning around the runway, fire trucks, ambulances, and the distinctive shapes of military security forces taking defensive positions. Martinez was calling out airspeeds and altitudes with the focused precision of a pilot fighting to save his aircraft. The fuel gauges showed quantities so low they were essentially flying on fumes. One engine failure, one missed approach, and they would become a smoking crater in the Nevada desert. Kozlov remained near the cockpit, his eyes scanning the approaching airfield with the alertness of someone who knew exactly what to look for. "Major, when we touch down, you need to understand that my extraction team is already in position. They've been planning this for months." "Your extraction team," Morrison's voice carried a note of betrayal. "You're one of them." "No, Captain, I'm the target, but the people who want what I know have infiltrated Edwards' security. The moment this aircraft stops moving, they'll move to take me." Iris processed this final piece of the puzzle. The entire crisis had been orchestrated not to destroy the aircraft, but to force it to land at a specific location where hostile operatives could blend in with legitimate security response. Kozlov wasn't just carrying intelligence. He was carrying something so valuable that foreign governments were willing to risk an international incident to obtain it. The runway threshold passed beneath them, concrete and steel rushing by at 140 miles per hour. Martinez pulled back on the yoke, bleeding off airspeed as the main landing gear touched down with a controlled impact that sent vibrations through the entire aircraft. "Welcome to Edwards Air Force Base," Morrison announced, but his voice carried no relief. Through the windscreen, Iris could see security vehicles converging on their position. Some wore the standard markings of Air Force security forces. Others were unmarked, their occupants wearing tactical gear that looked somehow wrong, too new, too pristine, lacking the worn edges that came with genuine military service. The real fight was about to begin. The Boeing 737 rolled to a stop on the Edwards tarmac, surrounded by a constellation of emergency vehicles and security forces. But Iris noticed details that triggered her combat-trained instincts. Some of the response teams were positioning themselves not for passenger evacuation, but for tactical control of the aircraft. "Colonel Chen, Nighthawk," she transmitted on the emergency frequency. "I need verification on all security personnel approaching our aircraft. We may have hostile elements mixed in with your response teams." "Nighthawk, we're working on positive identification now. Remain aboard your aircraft until we give the all-clear." Through the cabin windows, passengers were pointing excitedly at the military aircraft on static display, the impressive hangars, and the obvious signs of high-security operations. None of them realized they were sitting in the center of what was about to become a battlefield. Kozlov moved forward into the cockpit proper, his diplomatic composure finally cracking under the strain. "Major, I need you to understand what I'm carrying. It's not just intelligence. It's proof that a foreign government has placed operatives inside the highest levels of American military installations." "Which government?" Morrison asked. "That's the problem. We don't know. Could be Russian, Chinese, Iranian, maybe all three working together. But they have people inside Edwards with security clearances, access codes, and the ability to move freely around classified projects." The implications hit Iris like a physical blow. Edwards wasn't just home to test aircraft. It housed some of the most advanced aerospace technology in the world. Hypersonic vehicles, stealth systems, directed energy weapons. If hostile operatives had access to those programs, the damage to national security would be incalculable. Her phone, which had been silent since the final countdown message, suddenly rang. The caller ID showed only a number she didn't recognize. "Major Valdez." The voice on the other end was electronically distorted, artificially generated. "You have performed admirably so far. Now we need you to ensure that Mr. Kozlov exits your aircraft and moves to the unmarked black SUV parked 50 meters from your nose gear." Iris looked through the windscreen and spotted the vehicle, a generic government sedan that could belong to any of a dozen agencies. But something about its positioning was wrong. It was too far from the main security cordon, positioned for a quick exit rather than protective custody. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then the explosive device we placed aboard your aircraft during your layover in Denver will detonate in approximately 60 seconds. The line went dead. Iris stared at the phone, her mind racing through possibilities and tactical assessments. A bomb aboard the aircraft would explain the sophisticated nature of the transponder hack. Someone had physical access during maintenance. But it also meant that everyone aboard was still in mortal danger. "Martinez, contact ground control immediately. Tell them we have a possible explosive device aboard and need immediate passenger evacuation." But even as she spoke, Iris realized the terrible logic of the situation. If they evacuated 163 passengers onto the tarmac, the chaos would provide perfect cover for Kozlov's extraction. If they remained aboard, everyone would die in an explosion that would look like a terrorist attack. The evacuation began with controlled panic. Flight attendants opened the emergency slides as passengers moved toward exits with the urgent confusion of people who knew something was desperately wrong, but didn't understand exactly what. Outside, Air Force security forces maintained a perimeter, while bomb disposal experts approached the aircraft with equipment designed to detect explosive devices. But Iris kept her eyes on the black SUV. It hadn't moved, its occupants seemingly unconcerned by the security activity around them. That level of confidence suggested either remarkable stupidity or insider knowledge that they wouldn't be challenged by the legitimate security forces. "Kozlov, what exactly are you carrying?" she asked as passengers continued streaming past the cockpit toward the exits. He reached into his jacket and produced a small encrypted hard drive, no larger than a thumb drive. 18 months of surveillance data, financial records, communication intercepts, personnel files, enough to identify every foreign operative who's penetrated American military installations over the past decade. Such a small thing to cause so much death and chaos. Iris studied the device, understanding now why multiple governments would risk everything to obtain or destroy it. The intelligence it contained would either revolutionize counterespionage operations or expose networks that had taken years to establish. "Major," Martinez called from his position at the instrument panel. "Bomb disposal is reporting no explosive devices found in the cargo hold or passenger compartment, but they're still checking the electronics bay." Relief mixed with new suspicion in Iris's mind. Either the bomb threat was a bluff designed to force evacuation, or the device was so well hidden that even military experts couldn't locate it quickly. Both possibilities suggested a level of sophistication that went far beyond typical terrorist operations. Colonel Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "Nighthawk, we have positive identification on all security personnel except for 3 individuals in an unmarked vehicle. They're not responding to our authentication requests." The black SUV. Iris watched as its doors opened and 4 figures emerged, dressed in tactical gear that looked legitimate but carried weapons in a configuration she didn't recognize. They were moving purposefully toward the aircraft, not with the cautious approach of law enforcement, but with the direct aggression of a military assault team. "Sarah, you have hostile operatives approaching our aircraft from the northwest. Black SUV, 4 subjects armed with automatic weapons." "We see them, Nighthawk. Security forces are moving to intercept." But the response seemed sluggish, almost rehearsed. Some of the Air Force security personnel were converging on the SUV team, but others were hanging back, their body language suggesting uncertainty about who was friend and who was foe. Iris realized with growing horror that Chen's earlier assessment was correct. Edwards Air Force Base had been compromised. Some of the security forces responding to their emergency landing were legitimate military personnel. Others were foreign operatives who had spent months or years building false identities and gaining security clearances. The battle for Viktor Kozlov's intelligence was about to begin, and Iris couldn't tell who was on which side. Gunfire erupted on the tarmac as the 2 groups of security forces engaged each other. Muzzle flashes strobed in the afternoon sun, while passengers screamed and dove for cover behind emergency vehicles. The carefully choreographed emergency response dissolved into chaos as Iris watched genuine Air Force personnel fighting what appeared to be other genuine Air Force personnel. "All passengers, move away from the aircraft immediately." Colonel Chen's voice boomed over external loudspeakers. "Seek cover behind the fire trucks and ambulances." Iris grabbed Kozlov's arm as he moved toward the cockpit door. "Where do you think you're going?" "They're fighting over me, Major. The longer I remain here, the more people die. And the moment you step off this aircraft, you're dead anyway." Through the windscreen, she could see the tactical situation developing with the clarity that came from hundreds of hours of combat experience. The team from the black SUV was advancing with practiced coordination, using suppressing fire to keep the legitimate security forces pinned behind vehicles. But the Air Force personnel were fighting back with equal skill, suggesting that both sides were composed of highly trained operators. Martinez was monitoring emergency frequencies, his face pale as reports flooded in from around the base. "Major, we're getting reports of similar firefights at 3 other locations on Edwards: the motor pool, the command bunker, and Hangar 7. Hangar 7. Iris had heard references to that facility during her active duty years, always spoken in whispers, always connected to projects that officially didn't exist. If hostile operatives were making a coordinated assault on multiple targets, they weren't just after Kozlov. They were using his extraction as cover for something much larger. Her phone rang again, the same distort.